Get ready for a no BS approach to health and fitness. This is NBS Fitness Radio.
All right, what's up? We're back with Morgan Cox. Morgan went to high school with me, played football together. Morgan then went to University of Tennessee and long snapped. And from there went to the Baltimore Ravens and has been a long snapper in the NFL for 11 total seasons. Mm-hmm. So welcome to NBS Fitness Radio, Morgan.
Glad to be on.
Cool, dude. So talk to me a little bit. Kind of want to walk through is like your history in relation to fitness and things that you've done, lessons that you've learned. So kind of talk to like, when did you first start playing football?
Let's see. I first started playing football in I would have been about fifth grade. I think I was 10 or 11 years old. Played for the CYA Bucks.
Nice. And
this is actually one of my first practices was when I actually went out for long snapper as well. So I've been long snapping just as long as I've been playing football.
So you started long snapping
right away.
Did your dad suggest it, or why'd you do that?
Well, I mean, it's not something that like everybody's gonna like jump on to go out for. So like the very first practice, the coach, Andrew Burris, who was my dentist as well at the time, asked, basically lined everybody up at practice and gave everybody a shot at long snapping.
Oh, nice.
Because it was like tryouts. And so I didn't do that good the first time, but, as good dads do, my dad was at the practice and he pulled me aside. I was like, hey, you want to give it a shot again? I don't know why to this day, like he thought to do that or whatever. I think he had known a couple long snappers that played in the NFL or just in general, and also just kind of wanted to help me out. So I started practicing on the side while everybody else had their turn. And I started doing a little bit better, and the coach just took notice and we're like, hey, Morgan can be our long snapper. And so I was throwing like end over end snaps.
Right.
I'm not like throwing back laser beams by any stretch of the imagination, but so I picked it up from there. And then, I've always played football since that time. So as I progressed, I never really started, I would say, I started in 7th grade at ECS, in 8th grade at ECS. But then in high school, I was really the backup, little freshman team. But then I didn't actually start until the first game into my junior year, would have been your senior year.
Start at long snapper.
Yeah. Or like position wise either. So like, I don't know. Sports for me growing up were an avenue to have fun with my friends, not to like. I'm a competitive person by nature, but not uber competitive. So like, I didn't go out just to like beat the other guy. I went out to really just have fun, and that was kind of instilled in me from like T-ball. Like the first question mom and dad asked after a game was like, "Did you try your best and did you have fun?" It was never like, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you could have done this better.
Yeah, let's take you through a film analysis.
Yeah, and so. So over time, my fitness journey or my, athletic journey was filled with fun. That's the only way I'd really know or have known to approach it.
And did you play other sports in middle school and high school?
Yeah. And, in elementary school, I played soccer.
Okay.
Like probably every kid does at some point, just really because it involves a lot of running and energy, getting out.
And no equipment, just a ball.
And zero equipment. Yeah. So played soccer, a little bit of golf, very little tennis. Let's see. And then I played baseball. I played T-ball from age 4 or whatever, and through baseball. Let's see. And then basketball I played as well. And then football, obviously. So
did you play, what sports did you play in high school?
I went out for the baseball team freshman year, but Coach Jim Hines, God rest his soul, he told me, Morgan, he said, I appreciate you coming out, but I think it's best if you focused on football. It's one of my favorite I mean, things that anybody's ever told me, but for Coach Hines to tell me that.
The thing that like that makes that so funny that like if you don't know who that is like I don't recall Coach Hines cutting anybody
Yes.
ever in the 4 years that I was there.
Yes. So so I went out for baseball. I couldn't hit. I could sort of catch. I couldn't throw. So like, it was one of those things that, yeah, sure, I was upset about it, but I wasn't like just crushed over it.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes back to like my attitude towards things is like, you know, I appreciated being able to go out and having the opportunity, but at the same time, I went and played church league ball on Saturdays, and I might as well have been, you know,
The MVP
of the league, and I had a great time doing it. I didn't play every day, and it didn't like, you know, take over my life, but I had a lot of fun doing it at the same time. But yes, you're right. You're right. Coach Hines and you played baseball.
You're right.
Yeah, so you know.
In the previous podcast, we were talking about how young athletes nowadays are almost treated like professional athletes in the sense of like pushing them towards specialization at such a young age, that especially in like baseball, soccer, basketball, and volleyball. The nice thing about football is that there's only one season. There's no AAU football. There's no club football, and
everybody develops on the same level throughout. There's, you know, aside from maybe like what's now becoming a lot bigger is like 7-on-7, but it's still pretty much the same. I mean, like just because the receivers and quarterbacks are getting more work maybe in the 7-on-7 doesn't mean the linemen are falling behind. Like there's just like only one way to play football, and that's, you know, really in the fall.
And it kind of forces you to go do some type of other activity.
100%, and which I encourage people to do all the time. I mean, there's tons of studies out there now about not being specialized in one sport. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Baltimore, which is like the lacrosse mecca of the world, and I see a lot of kids, the same kind of thing as baseball can be down here, is like they can get burned out because it's just all they're doing. There's no break whatsoever because you can play indoor. And it's a great sport. It's a fun sport to watch, but at the same time, it just goes back to that specialization. You need to be well-rounded, not only from a mentally, just not doing the same thing for 365 days, but also from physically. Helps prevent injuries. There's also tons of studies on that about playing other sports and how it helps you develop physically and pushes your bodies in ways that one specific sport is just not going to do. And same thing, like I relate it to for long snapping for me is like I'm doing a repetitive motion over and over and over and over all the time. And so in a lot of ways, I have to reset myself every off season to not, you know, wear out in certain specific areas, wrists, elbows, arms, you know, hips. So I have to work in different ways for my body to not be overused in certain areas.
Yeah, I mean the fact that like, I think one of the things that's most impressive about you is how old are you in fifth grade?
About 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got 25 years of playing a sport.
Yeah.
And like how many kids did we play ball with who were burnt out by the time that they were seniors? Who were good players, could have gone and played, maybe not D1, but could have gone and played some D2 ball. They were just like, I'm done. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, and that can happen. I mean, again, like we kind of said before, is like it doesn't happen as much in football as much it is. You know, we've always said that football is the great meritocracy, the ultimate meritocracy, where like what you do on the field is what should determine how far you go in the sport.
Right.
And so. Yeah, you see that over time of like, you know, how are you performing and what are you doing to prepare yourself to perform at your best every week, giving no excuses and just doing your job each week. That's what we always say.
When did you first go into the weight room? Like, do you recall your first weight training experience?
I don't recall my first weight training experience, but Coach Aubrey Boren, shout out, was my first weight coach. And, you know, Coach Boren was jacked, as you know. I mean, you were in there with him too. And so, like, we all looked up to him and just, like, you know, every word out of his mouth, we wanted to learn more about weightlifting and stuff. I didn't take it as seriously as I should have at the beginning, but I do remember like being in there and learning the movements and learning just like a work ethic. That's where your work ethic starts, is like you're pushing like sports is fun when you're young. And I mean, it's still fun for me now, but like at the same time, like when you get in the weight room, there's an element of just training where you just have to push yourself in more ways than like playing a sport is.
Yeah.
And like there is work involved in it. And so I think that was one of my first experiences where like the work was like really, really hard. I don't remember the exercise name, but we all would grab a 25 or a 45 pound plate and we'd all have to do curls, push outs, and what was it? Over the head. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like
triceps and stuff.
Yeah. It was like a plate.
Yeah. We always used to call it
session.
out. Yeah. It was awesome. But it was my first experience with like, I'm going to push myself further than I thought that I could go.
Yeah. I got two cool stories. So, Coach Bourne was my first, and I take that back. He was my first real weight strength coach. When I was at Houston, the baseball coach did some of the weight training, but he really was like a strength coach.
Gotcha.
But a couple years ago, Coach Bourne came to one of our squat, bench, deadlift clinics.
Oh, cool.
And it was like, I got to coach and teach the guy who
Yeah.
coached and taught me.
That's
I was
awesome.
like, this is a crazy, awesome
How
turnaround.
that comes around.
But I think one of the reasons that all of us appreciated Coach Bourne so much, and I think this is incredibly important for parents to understand, athletes to understand, but specifically coaches to understand, was Coach Bourne was in the weight room getting after it, and we got to see that. And like I have a saying is it's like no fat strength coaches.
Yeah.
Because we've all been like, youth are going to respect adults what they should, and they're going to listen to adults what they tell them to do. But there's just something different when you know that coach is going to put out and do the same kind of stuff. And same thing with me. Like in college, I had a coach who was really influential in my life, Coach Randy Grierson, and he was our strength coach for a while. But like, I was willing to put out for Coach G because I knew he was doing it himself. Like he was out. I would see him in the morning getting after it. Versus like when you have some overweight coach yelling at kids, calling them names and telling them to get after it, and you're like, bro, you're not doing this. You're, like you haven't.
You probably found this on the internet somewhere.
You haven't exercised in 20 years.
Right.
That's a kind of a pet peeve of mine of like coaches who don't take care of themselves physically, yelling at youth athletes and calling them names for not putting out. So okay, so went through high school, and do you recall what kind of like strength programs we did in high school?
Not really, other than just like squat, clean, bench. Yeah, I remember it was like Olympic. Would that be not Olympic? It would be.
We had Olympic elements in there. I don't ever recall snatching. Yeah, but we did hang cleans. And then we did the major movements, squat, bench. Yeah. I don't ever recall deadlifting. Yeah.
So much of it, from what I recall too, and I think this is what high school weight rooms can and should, team weight rooms should be about, was about the teamwork too. It was like pushing the next guy and seeing them push themselves and that kind of thing. So
yeah, it's a nice like peer pressure situation. Well, it can be good and bad. So like there's those situations where like you're just with someone who's stronger than you, and then so you do the weight that they're doing, and you really shouldn't be doing that, But there is a camaraderie that comes from like doing hard physical things together, pushing each other, high fiving each other. When there's a component of don't be the weak link. If it's like, hey, like if anyone puts the plate down, we're starting over, that kind of stuff. All those things are great.
And just seeing somebody improve too. You didn't have to be like, I remember that we celebrated anybody that like showed improvements. It wasn't like, Hall Simmons was squatting over 400 pounds and we, that was cool. And props to Hall, but at the same time, there were other guys that were making improvements and even maybe bigger improvements to themselves than even just he was.
Anyone who's making progress, like, hey,
Yeah.
that's awesome for them, but two, that's great for us because now we have a bigger, stronger kid on our team that we can rely on to kick ass more better.
Exactly.
Okay, so then went on to play SEC ball at University of Tennessee. What was kind of the biggest? We'll kind of talk just sports first. But what was like the biggest change you saw going from smaller private high school to like biggest college stage?
I always tell people that the jump from high school to college is a physical one. I had a long way to go physically. I didn't start right when I got to Tennessee. I was a redshirted first, then I sat the bench my second year, and then I played 3 years.
Yeah.
But coming from high school, even as much as I lifted, I only weighed 200 pounds in high school. That was the heaviest I ever weighed, and I played offensive line. I had the frame to hold it. I just, for whatever reason, just like couldn't gain weight really. But once I got to college, I had to make big strength gains in order to feel adequate enough to play. I was a good long snapper to be able to stick on the squad, but at the same time, like there's a physical element to college football that you have to keep up or else you're going to get hurt. And so I needed those 2 years to really develop physically. And so I got in the weight room. First year, redshirt years, is a tough year to focus, really. I should put it that way. It's but then the second year I realized, okay, well, now they have me on the road. I'm like backup. I'm like the true backup here.
Like I might actually have to go on the field.
I could go in the game.
Yeah.
So it's like I really kind of started to lock down a lot better of like, all right, I got to physically develop more, push myself to gain some weight, even if I'm just the backup this year, next year is my time. And so I need to be ready for that just the same. And so I made jumps there. And then I remember specifically like having other guys in the weight room that pushed me at Tennessee, the same way that we were talking about it at ECS. So like there's the team element of, and then you have your friend element that, you have guys that you're kind of equal with in the weight room.
Did y'all have weight training groups that you trained with that group all the time? Like that was always your crew? Yeah,
and it was usually broken up into position-specific stuff. And so I was always with the specialists, and we just had we had some pretty strong specialist guys that I stuck with. And, when you see them making gains, like you've got to, keep up the slack, it's just like not – you don't want to fall behind. And so like I got a lot of motivation from that, pushing myself from that standpoint of, and then I started to look towards like once I got in my second year starting my junior year, my fourth year, I started to like kind of consider like, well, is the NFL a possibility? Because up to that point, I just was excited to be at Tennessee. I'm just kind of the guy that's always smiling at the facility. I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah.
And then I start looking up, like, what do I need to look like? What does a NFL long snapper need to be like in order to make it? And so, like, I kind of set some goals for myself in that year, and then going into my senior year as well. So, but yeah, I mean, like I said, jump from high school to college is a physical one, and so I was a stick. Coach Fulmer likes to say when I got to Tennessee, all I had was a big butt. and so he still loves to tell that to this day. And so I developed and into a SEC snapper by my third year. And so it was all due to, getting myself in the weight room, pushing myself, not only, in the weight room, but otherwise, in nutrition wise, which I still am fighting that battle.
I want to hit on that in a second. Did anything change? Like, what was the change in like the actual weight training approach, like weight room from going from ECS to college?
I don't remember, like me personally, I don't remember there was some more complex movements for sure. But I remember I had teammates that had really never lifted a weight before. Right. So I felt like I was ahead of the game coming from Coach Boren's weight room into the Tennessee weight room and just like seeing these exercises that I've done before, or I at least have some general knowledge of like what the form should look like.
Yeah.
There were, I think we did like snatch and front squat, and those are a couple of things that I remember off the top of my head that were somewhat new to me. But also I learned about kind of like the accessory movement or core movement.
Yeah.
A lot of Swiss ball stuff was introduced. Plyo stuff was introduced. I remember we did that at tennis. I mean, at ECS as well. We scraped many a shin on those wooden boxes, but just being more complex and running program too was a big difference.
Was it like the conditioning piece and the speed work?
Whole different ball game there.
Yeah, when what I kind of noticed is, or what I kind of tell people is, when you make the jump from high school to college, you go from being the biggest, strongest, fastest kid on your team to just being one of a bunch of people who are big, strong, and fast.
Yeah.
And so that there's like this big, giant jump where like everyone you go against is the best person you ever went against in high school.
Correct.
And so there's this like instantaneous jump in skill level.
Yeah.
And what I have noticed the difference between like D2 ball, D1 AA, and then D1 ball is then just size, meaning like you'll have linemen in D2 ball 6 foot, 6'2", 300, and then in D1 ball you've got 6'3" to 6'6", 315 to 320, right?
Yeah.
You'll get some like still the same speed receivers. 5'8" to 5'10".
Yeah.
And then in college you're gonna get like 6 foot, 6'2", and then a
little bit of extra gear.
Yeah, and you're gonna get a couple of those extra freaks.
Right.
The ones that are just like true, like this is a future NFL guy. You're just not typically gonna get those in D2.
Yeah.
But like in D1 you're gonna get a couple of those guys like, oh my gosh, this dude's a complete freak.
I mean, I remember like one of my first practices and going in at Snapper, they kind of gave me a, like, hey, welcome to the University of Tennessee. And I snapped the ball, and the guy like I'm like trying to catch the guy as he's running by me to block him. And then the next rep was, all right, you got to go cover. I didn't make it like 2 yards down the field. Dude like completely locked me down.
Yeah.
And I even asked him afterwards, I was like, was that even remotely hard? And he was like, no, it wasn't.
So that's it. Like when you're 18 versus going against a 22-year-old, there's a big maturity development there. Just like you've got that many more years of just like hormones, maturity, growth in you, plus 4 to 5 years of like better nutrition, better training. I think,
and he was a running back, and I'm a long snapper. There was a considerable skill difference that would have never been overcome, no matter how much training I did for it.
It's crazy to think when I was at LSU, like watching these guys come in who are 5-star recruits, amazing athletes, never stepped foot in the weight room.
Correct.
No clue. And like uncoordinated as could possibly be in the weight room too. Like very good, do amazing things on the field, can't coordinate their bodies under a bar. But they picked it up quick.
I was going to say, and to me, that like just speaks to their potential of where they could go. Is like you might have a guy that's been in the weight room and understands the movements and stuff, and he's pushing a certain amount of weight. But I mean, I saw plenty of freaks that like came in and they had the worst form ever, but they were squatting more than the other guy. Will fine tune that technique, and they're limitless basically.
And that's what, like, when you get that 5 years underneath that,
exactly,
and then you're like, oh wow, okay,
we had many guys like that.
Then you got guys who, in 3 to 4 years of weight training are benching double body weight or more.
Correct. Yeah.
And then we have people who have been doing it for decades in here that will never hit.
Yeah,
double body weight bench press.
We had an offensive lineman, still a good friend of mine to this day. Jock McClennan came in, and like I think he went to school at Baylor in Chattanooga, and he came in and he set the bench record like within a year or something like that. and he's a 300-pound guy, and he benched double his body weight. It's like, wow. Okay, yeah.
That's bonkers.
Yeah.
Well, so you kind of hit on nutrition. how did nutrition change from high school to college?
So I'll give you like the full wide span. When I was in high school, my dad used to make shakes at night for me. And in those shakes were like ice cream, Snickers, peanut butter, like just straight
2,000 calories of sugar.
Yeah. 2,000 calories of sugar. Whereas I made a shake earlier, the one that, we had talked about, banana and spinach and protein, powder and whatever. What else? Oatmeal. Yeah. Oatmeal. Yeah. Just like it, like that's the development over time. Now from high school to college, there was a difference. I mean, in the, the training table where they had specific stuff set out for us. They wanted us to eat certain things. You still found your little pockets of like unhealthiness when you're going through there. But like my attitude always was like, I'm just going to try and eat a whole lot and gain weight that way. Yeah. What I wish I had set in for me at the time was you can also like gaining weight in the weight, like you can gain weight in the weight room by like how hard you push yourself. And it's not that I wasn't necessarily pushing myself, probably not in the right ways. But I found at Tennessee, I figured out late at Tennessee that like nutrition makes a big difference in terms of like how you can push your body. And you can't just like, I learned that you can't just eat your way to more weight. Yeah. Like you can. It's just, I shouldn't say that. It's just like
but you
from an athletic standpoint, the weight that I wanted to gain was not going to be gained just in the cafeteria. I had to put it on in the weight room as well.
Did y'all have a nutrition coach that worked with y'all? Do you recall that at all?
Yeah, it was Allison Maurer. She came on, I want to say my 4th or 5th year, and that's when I really started to like, okay, nutrition is a lot bigger thing than just eating a whole bunch of like potatoes and red meat.
Yeah, and it's interesting how like things trickle down, because now every NFL program has a nutrition program.
Correct,
has a nutrition or dietitian that works with them, and that's kind of trickled down into college, and it's now trickling down into high school. But like you didn't have a nutrition coach at college until almost your senior year.
Yeah, it took a while, and even now it's more like when I go back to Tennessee now, it's way more like developed. The program is way more developed. I don't think Allison's there anymore, but like, I mean, now there's like 4 or 5 people in there, setting out meals or setting out snacks, stuff for like the guys to go and get. And this at Tennessee, they've got all the resources available at their disposal. But they have like a whole bar that's like literally right off of the weight room where as soon as you get finished, you walk in and you've got like a custom shake that you want, like whatever your body needs at the time. If you need to lose weight, it's it's probably more leafy stuff. Whereas like if you need to gain weight or you need more protein or whatever, it's so customized. And that happened in Baltimore as well, where Sarah Snyder came in last year, where she really changed the whole dynamic of nutrition, really in the entire building, because prior to that, it was really somebody that was just kind of like upstairs that was doing most of the decision making with regards to food. And so then Sarah comes in and really kind of fine tuned everything to the point that we were like eating so much better. The food quality is so much better. The protein was so much better. We had somebody that we could go to, sit down with, meet with, and basically say, this is what you need in order for you to be at your best. This is what you should eat on during the week. On game days, what your post practice snack should be is what your post. She was like, I mean, in every sense, a professional of
just like a weight training coach or giving you, hey, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, these are the things you have to do in order to like meet your goals and stuff. And we had, in Baltimore now they have an actual a DEXA scanner. Yeah, they had an InBody, which was I was on that every Friday or once a month, and then we weighed in every week. But then, they actually brought in a DEXA scanner to where like we can do that however many times, once a month, I think, as well. And they actually bring in somebody each month in order to like scan somebody. So it's important to know what your body's composition is. Like I know down to like into the season what my body's going to look like, preseason, after like during off season workouts and stuff like that. So it's very fine tuned now.
Yeah, and it's helping them kind of and you kind of track or catch things before they become a big deal. Like if you end up losing, like if you lose 5% of your muscle mass, like oops, that's not a good thing. What do we need to do to kind of adjust this? Are you overtraining? Are you undertraining? What do we need to do nutrition wise? And they can. It's just another tool in the toolbox and another metric that they can kind of track and adjust and all that. I kind of one thing I ask all the high school athletes that come in here is how many of your friends follow like a good nutrition program, and like across the board it's always zero. And I always say, hey, look, like all you guys are playing ball. Most of you guys are doing weight training. A lot of you can afford to come and have like a personal strength coach or go to get like a personal skill session. The one thing none of y'all are doing is eating right. And it's and then that can be like
you're just kind of young and invincible in a sense. I mean, like I remember being that way. You can you feel like you can eat whatever you want, but if you start those habits at that time, they're much easier. It's much easier down the road when like, I don't know. Yeah, I can't speak from experience, but like walking through Kroger and you seeing like a Ponchos dip and you're like, it's calling my name.
Yeah.
But
you can absolutely get away with it in high school.
Correct.
And usually in college, but it's once the reality is once you get older, like you just can't get away with all those things. I find like most high school athletes that I know are undernourished. They don't eat enough. They just skip breakfast. Have like chips in a sandwich or something for lunch. Then they'll have like Taco Bell after school. Then they have a good dinner, like their mom makes dinner, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or they're undernourished, but they're overeating calories and like bad calories during Taco Bell, snacking on Little Debbie's and whatnot. And then in college, at that point, you kind of like going through 2-a-days, going through like a year-round program, you kind of realize like I got to get the calories in. And then kind of what happened to me and like a lot of athletes I've seen in college was, okay, well then you get the calories in now, but they're just complete crap.
Yeah, yeah.
You can get away with it just because you're 18 to 22.
Yeah, and one big part that I'm beginning to understand too about nutrition and just in sport in general is like recovery. And I don't know if this is a totally different topic for you, but like to me, it's kind of all a part is like how does your body recover? And so whether that be like cold tub, hot tub, just rest in general, compression, whatever, but like nutrition also plays a huge part. Like, are you filling yourself with stuff that's going to aid your recovery?
Yeah.
I mean, it really doesn't matter if you're a serious athlete or just, a guy, working.
You're a human. You got to perform.
Yeah. If you're sitting down, even if you're sitting at a desk job or whatever, you still need your body to recover, and you don't want it to be, I don't really know how to put it, just like eating itself. I mean, like you want your muscles to be fed and blood flow to be as efficient as possible, and that's how you get the best recovery. That's how you feel best and wake up the best every day.
Yeah, puts you in the right mindset, the right mood. Your mind works well.
I'm not perfect. Like, believe me, like after the season and even during the season, sometimes I'm, there's comfort food that just helps you get through mentally sometimes. But
the thing is, like, if your foundation, if 90% of what you're doing is eating the good stuff, then the other 10% doesn't make a difference. But if your foundation is bad stuff, then that's what you're gonna get.
I mean, I'm not a professional by any stretch of the imagination, but everybody says like the cheat day is like, and I don't know if it's like chemically or biologically like a real thing, but from a standpoint, when you put yourself on such a strict, or not even strict, but just like a disciplined diet, there's just times where like, you just want some pizza or you want some ice cream or whatever else.
Oh yeah.
For me, it's chips and cheese dip. I just gotta have some. I gotta have some ponchos every once in a while.
Cheese dip.
Yeah.
No, the cheat days are great. physical and mental kind of boost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like if you notice, okay, if I'm eating pretty clean and I have one of those, like you feel better the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have 3 or 4 of those back to back, then you start feeling sluggish again.
Yeah, like the most epic cheat days are
cheese
days. Those are mine. Or the Rock's cheat days. I don't know if you've ever seen. He's got like 6 pizzas and
he's like
3 boxes of donuts.
He's doing like 10,000 calories.
Yeah,
It's bonkers.
Yeah.
Okay, so went through UT, and then you get signed by the Baltimore Ravens. You come in. What was the biggest change you saw, like going from college to pros?
So high school to college is physical. College to pros is mental. Because now it's your job.
Right.
Somebody's paying you to do a certain job, and they don't care. You got to get the job done.
Right.
There are no excuses. You just have to do your job. And so that for me was a big realization. Let's see, it was after my like second or third game. I already won the job. I'd gone through OTAs and stuff. And my attitude in OTAs, to backtrack a little bit, my attitude in OTAs was just like make it to the next day.
Yeah.
When I got to the Baltimore Ravens, I had a feeling that I could compete.
Yeah.
I wanted to get game film, which is what I mean by that is like playing in a preseason game, because that's so big to NFL teams, and just so they're not like flying blind. Like, okay, we've got at least something to go on here, a reason to bring him in. And so I wanted game tape. So just in order to like bite off pieces that I could chew, I said, this is what I want to do. I'm not trying to win the job the first day. I just want to be consistent all the way through. And so I was doing that, and then I won the job after the first. It was after the first preseason game. They gave me the whole preseason game, and then they parted ways with the other guy that I was competing with. So it was my job. I had to get tuned up and ready to go through the rest of training camp. I got into the first game was on Monday night. So my very first NFL game was on Monday night. We had a lightning delay.
Who'd y'all play?
The New York Jets.
Okay.
In the Meadowlands.
Nice.
Yeah, in the Meadowlands. And so we go through that game, and I'm still just so green that like it's hard for me to even understand what's happening. Like I'm on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Watched Monday night, my whole life.
Right.
And it was just hard for me to even grasp the moment, what I was in and what I was doing. The game ended like 9-10. And like like I said, looking back, I don't even remember thinking about anything other than just like,
holy crap.
Oh my gosh, I'm playing NFL football. But then, fast forward a couple weeks into that first season, and I'm like sitting in my, 1-bedroom apartment in Baltimore, and I just come from college where I'm surrounded by my friends at all times, and typically in college, there's just a lot of there's a lot of stuff that's going on. You got to go to class, or you got to do this or do that, or there's a hangout or something like that. Well, I get to Baltimore, and I'm sitting in my apartment by myself, and I just feel like I'm missing something. Like I feel like I was like, am I supposed to be going to class right now? I feel like I'm supposed to be, am I missing a meeting? Like I was constantly scared to death that I was missing a meeting and I was going to get fined like $1,500 or whatever the fine is. And so, and then just kind of the reality of the situation was setting in. Like I was being paid a whole lot of money to do a job perfectly every time. Yeah. And so, it took me a little bit to kind of come down off of that. Like, listen, you've trained for, at that time it was, let's see, I was 24. So how long is that?
14 years.
Math, 14 years. Yeah. Trained for 14 years for this particular moment, basically stop panicking. Yeah. And so, went through, rookie season fine, got injured, had to come back from that. But, tore my ACL in week 16, which is a really tough time as well. And I can go into that. I tore my ACL, December 26th and had surgery, and then basically had 3 months by myself up in Baltimore where I had to rehab, and rehab is a lonely existence as it is. Yeah. But then being isolated in a city and, by yourself is really tough.
But you had to do it up in Baltimore
until March. It was like March 3rd because we went into a lockout that year. So I came back home, and it was it got better because I was around people,
That
people,
yeah.
like I like literally just around people.
Yeah.
Whereas up in Baltimore, I really didn't know anybody. I wasn't doing much, but yeah. So I went through that, came back the next season, and I tore my ACL again 4 years later, and had to come back from it
Same
again.
ACL?
No, other ACL.
Yeah.
So I got 2 new knees, and anyway, so came back from that, and that one was actually tougher injury to come back from because I did more damage to my right knee than I did my left knee, which was first, and so it was just a grind. But I've kind of going back to circling back to the days with Coach Bourne, when I started to learn to like do things that were hard that would eventually pay off, is like that kind of came back into my mind of like I got to push myself to get back on the field.
Is there anything you feel like you could have done to prevent the ACL tear? Because there's contact injuries that are unavoidable, and then there's the injuries that are somewhat avoidable. So, like, how do you feel about
the second ACL? For sure, the first ACL, the only thing that I could have done differently was, at least looking back, and I don't know if this is actually true or not, but like I had changed into 7 stud cleats for the December 26th game because Cleveland's field was like mush.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I might as well put on the thick studs to run around there. Looking back, I didn't need them. I would have been fine with just the regular cleats. But
you normally do the molded?
Normally do the molded.
Yeah.
And so like basically my foot was stuck in the ground, and on the field goal to the 2 defensive linemen, fell on top of the offensive lineman.
Yeah.
He lost his footing and fell on top of me. So it was a contact injury.
Yeah.
So other than changing my cleats, there's not much physically that I could have done.
Yeah.
Looking back on my right ACL, I definitely think I was deficient in some areas that led to instability, and, my knee shifted.
How did you tear that one?
Running down on a punt. I was running down on a punt. I was on like an older turf field.
Yeah.
Planted.
Like AstroTurf or actual field turf?
Actual field turf, but it was old field turf. I think it was towards the end of its life cycle, or however you say that. But planted on it and was trying to change directions, and I was trying to tackle Devin Hester, who is one of the greatest returners in NFL history. So
he's injured many.
Yes, I'm sure. He's broken many ankles. But so I planted, my knee shifted, and I knew it right away as soon as I went down. But
okay, so what was the biggest change you saw, like, in the weight room from college to NFL?
The approach that you take is becomes less team oriented. It is team oriented still, but it's more individual. Like I said before, it's your job. You've got to be able to do your job to the best of your ability, and if you don't, football is the ultimate meritocracy. You're gonna be out pretty quick. So it becomes a much more of individual based. Like, I've got to get better for myself and for my family to be able to provide. And so it's just a different mindset. I don't really know how else to explain it other than that, but you have to push yourself to be at your best at all times. And and that is,
you're treated more like a grown up. Like,
correct. Yeah. Yeah. Where in college, you're not necessarily not a grown up, but you're just, it's still about the team.
Yeah.
And so you're pushing yourself because your teammates around you are helping push you, and you're pushing them.
Yeah.
And your coach is telling you to do that. Whereas like in the professional leagues, your coach is not telling you to do that.
Yeah.
You are having to tell yourself to do that.
You're also at college almost the entire year.
Yes,
like,
correct.
You get the whatever 2-week summer break, and then you're back in school.
Your scenery changes in the professional. So like during the season, we're in the weight room in Baltimore, but then as soon as the last game hits, I come back to Memphis, and for a while I was doing my own training at 24-hour fitness centers, and I just didn't feel as adequate that was adequate enough. And then what was it, 3 years ago
this is our third off season.
So
we've done 2.
So I reached out to you because later years in the league, like I just I needed more focused work.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of felt like when I look back now, especially the work that we've done here, I look back now and I see like I was kind of just getting by. You know, I was doing okay, and I would get to the season and still be snapping well. But I mean, like I said, like these last 2 seasons, I felt much more kind of at peace going into training camp. Like I've done everything that I can do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and so much of it too is accountability as well. It's like, it's not easy to admit, but before, you know, I would go work out, but it might be at, you know, I don't know, it might be at 8 a.m. It might be at 8 p.m. There was no like set, you know, different responsibilities. But now we have a set time each week, each day. I can count on it. There's no other distractions other than that. Obviously, there are scheduling conflicts occasionally, but you and I are in here X number of days a week and X time a week, and that's what it's about. It's about the work.
Yeah, and you just have to focus on showing up and doing the work. And I make sure you know, the accountability is making sure you get here. You know, like, hey, bud, we're training this time.
Four texts and 4 emails I got this morning are my accountability.
Creating the program,
Correct.
Having a little bit more of an objective kind of point of view, and kind of
there's a directive to it. So one thing that I would say about my years past was like I'd go in and like, okay, what do I feel like doing today, or like. Or maybe I would set it up for the week, or like this would be the day. Like Monday was a arm day, and I'd just go get, you know, crush my arms for a while. Yeah, I get the pump, and then I'd leave or whatever. Whereas like now, like I looked over our schedule, you know, or from that's in the app or whatever, and I can see like this is the progression that we're gonna have over our. What is it, 12 weeks or something? Or
I wrote a 16-week off
16-week off season. Yeah. And so I can see the progression of like where we're going and where we have to start. You got to build the base, and then
it's just having a team approach. It's
correct.
You know, you and I are focused on helping you prepare you for the next season versus you just kind of doing it on your own, just like you'd have for everything else in football.
And that's a better way. That's a better way of putting it. I said it was an individual approach before, but it is from a standpoint of like the Ravens are the Ravens, and Tennessee, it was the team approach at Tennessee. Yeah. Whereas like here, I find my own team and surround myself with my own team. And I think, like I said before, I was kind of going at it as an individual basis, and now I've kind of like with you and with NBS, I found like a team to like help push me much better going into the season.
So last 2 seasons went to the Pro Bowl. That's 4 total Pro Bowls.
4 total Pro Bowls.
The last 2 seasons were the first year that long snappers were actually voted in. Previously, what was it?
Previously, you would have the coaching staff would be selected by basically the best regular season record after the divisional round of the playoffs. That sounds complicated, but basically the coaching staff that coached the Pro Bowl would select you. It was an honor to be selected those first 2 times by the Chiefs. They were we went to Hawaii and then to Disney World, and then two seasons ago I kind of talked with a few of the other long snappers around the league, like, hey, this would be pretty cool if we could get on the ballot. We're not asking for a lot, just like we don't have to be on the fan voting or anything like that. We just want to feel like we got, you know, elected to the Pro Bowl
by other NFL players.
By other NFL players, and even more specifically snappers and coaches, or specialists and coaches. Yep. Like there's the voting for the Pro Bowl. You want it to feel like your peers are selecting you to a certain to that position, to that kind of high position. Right. So that's the first 2 were great. I got selected by that coaching staff, and it was amazing. But then the last two that I've gotten, I feel most proud of because, you know, it was my peers that were looking at my film and said, we want you to represent us in the Pro Bowl.
And this past year, you were all pro, which means best in the league.
That would, so in all pro, that was another thing that we got instituted. This was the first year for all pro. All pro is elected a little differently. There are 50 members of the media, including like coaches. First one that comes to mind is like Tony Dungy and guys like that are in the media that know football, watch it all the time. that's how All Pro is selected. There's only, like in Pro Bowl, there's AFC and NFC, and each side votes for their side of long snappers. Whereas All Pro is you have 2 representatives from each position, I believe, and only those 2, and it doesn't matter AFC or NFC. It's like these 2 are the best, the people that we perceive as the best at their positions, and I got elected first team.
So that's your 9th and 10th year. Did you just play your 11th?
I just played my 11th.
Right, so that's your 10th and 11th year.
Yeah.
10th and 11th year, best years you've had.
Yeah.
What do you feel like physically? How have you been able to do that? Like what's allowed you to kind of still perform at even a higher level than when you were
3 letters.
starting?
NBS.
I love it.
No, I mean, but it kind of goes back to what I said before, is going into the season, these past 2 seasons, I felt more prepared than I ever have in seasons before. And I'm not NBS. I'm not coming into the season like, did I do enough?
Yeah.
You and I had a program, we stuck to it, and I went into it going, okay, I've done everything that I can do to be prepared for this training camp. Whereas like in previous years, I was going at it on an individual basis. Like, well, should I have done this? Should I have done that? Am I in shape? Am I strong enough? It turned out fine, but now I see that there's much more peace at basically exhausting all resources going into the season.
And you're setting yourself up, you're at your highest potential at that point.
Correct.
Like
yeah.
you've done everything possible to be at your best. And then
Correct.
knowing that builds, you already have the physical ability, but it also helps build the mental confidence.
And I can almost give like a concrete example. I remember before we started working, I would go into off-season workouts in Baltimore, and we would have like sled push days. I dreaded sled push days. As close to throwing up as I ever have been on our sled push days, because just the reality of the situation is like
they're hard.
They're really hard. And like, I'm a long snapper and I get grouped with tight ends who are, 6'6", 270 or whatever. And they can do it like it's nothing. And I'm expected to, or I expect myself to compete at that same, or as close to as I can come,
right?
That same level. And so I was dying. I have jokes. I still have running jokes with my old weight coaches about how pitiful I looked on those sled days. Well, then fast forward, we were working the first off season that you and I worked. I went into those off season workouts, and normally those sled push days were on like a Thursday or whatever. Well, I remember he changed it up to do it on a Wednesday, and I went through this whole sled push day, and like I was one of the only guys standing up and walking away from it. Everybody else was like laid out. And I was like, man, that was kind of a rough day. So wait, when is sled push day? And he was like, we just did it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, cool. Okay. Great. I feel great.
Yeah. It wasn't as bad as I remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that to me kind of is a perfect indication of like where I was before having a structured, resource-filled team.
Yeah.
Versus now.
Very cool. All right. Last thing, you won a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
What year?
2012 season, February 3rd, 2013 was when the game was played. Lights went out. Beyonce performed at halftime. Ray Lewis's last game. Couple storylines there.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. That was the
Lights Out. Oh, wait, what?
Was that the Justin Timberlake?
No.
Okay.
Beyonce. It was only Beyonce.
Beyonce.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
She waved at me at halftime. No big deal.
Oh, wow. Don't learn that. Describe that experience, because I think there's only like a handful of people that have ever done that.
Sure.
Like if you think of like all human history, there's literally only like a couple thousand people that have done that. So what was that experience like?
It was, going into it was kind of, like, I would say going back to like my first year, that first game, there's an element where you're just trying to like hang on, like you just can't even believe that it's happening, and then you're there, and going into the game, I really wasn't all like crazy nervous because I think like I said, I was just like barely understood what was happening. But then, to be honest with you, the lights went out, and I kind of got a chance to like look around and go, and I'm in the Superdome down in New Orleans, and I'm seeing like, Super Bowl signs everywhere. I'm like, oh wow, I'm here. Yeah. And then Ray Lewis comes walking up. I'm like playing catch with like Sam and Justin, my punter and kicker, and Ray Lewis walks up, and it's his last game, and he starts wanting to play catch with us, and I'm like, okay. And so I just kind of started feeling the weight of the moment in the middle of the game. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily overwhelming as much as it was just like a really cool moment. Now, fast forward in the game, we had a moment where they were potentially going to go up by 2 points, I think, and we would have had enough time to drive down and kick a field goal, and that was a little bit overwhelming. And so I was doing a lot of breathing exercises. Turns out our defense held. It was all good, but I did snap. We strategically took a safety on punt in order to be able to punt them further out of our end zone. And I was out there for the second to last snap of the game, which was pretty unbelievable. And then, the confetti falls down, and, you're just you've reached the pinnacle of the sport, basically. Yeah. And everybody's crying. My family runs on the field. My brother was the first one to reach me because little did I know at the time he was running from a police officer because he said supposedly wasn't supposed to be out there, but he had a pass, but he just like couldn't produce it for some reason. And he said, well, you're gonna have to catch me. So he took off running. That's awesome. And he like jumped in my arms, and the police officer, like, he had like my jersey on. Obviously I was wearing my jersey, and police officer was like, all right, whatever. Yeah. And just walked off. But it was just it was an amazing moment. And then the whole ceremony afterwards was awesome.
Yeah. Very cool.
And then parade. And I mean, there's just like, I can see where the Super Bowl hangover happens because like, you just don't stop celebrating it. I mean, even because even in the middle of June, we go to the White House and we get our rings, and you kind of celebrate it all over again. Yeah. And so, but it was just an unbelievable experience.
I bet, man. That's awesome. All right, Morgan, thanks for being on NBS Fitness Radio.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Let's go train.
That's right.
All right, bud.
Thank you for listening to NBS Fitness Radio. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, follow us on social media, and check out our website at www.nbsfitness.net. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more NBS Fitness Radio.